You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium. Available on Apple Podcast, Substack, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the Great Smog of London. So it's over to you now, Mark, so long as you can see what you're doing through the smog.
The Great Smog of 1952 was a severe air pollution event which affected London, England in the United Kingdom. It was, at that time, a period of unusually cold weather combined with an anticyclone and windless conditions, which collected airborne pollutants, mostly arising from the use of coal, which formed a thick layer of smog over the city of London, lasting from the Friday of the 5th of December to Tuesday the 9th of December, and then it quickly dispersed as soon as the weather changed. The smog itself had caused major disruption by reducing visibility and even penetrating indoor areas, far more severely than any other previous smog events, which were later nicknamed as Peasoupers. And in the following weeks, government medical reports estimated that up to 4,000 people had died as a result from the smog, and 100,000 more were made very ill by the smog's effects on the human respiratory tract. However, a more recent research has suggested that the total number of fatalities was considerably greater, with some estimates of between 10,000 and 12,000 deaths. According to reports, London's poor air quality had been a problem since at least the 13th century. However, the Great Smog of 1952 was many times worse than anything that the city had ever experienced before, with it being thought of as the worst air pollution event in the history of the United Kingdom, and the most significant for its effects on environmental research, government regulation, and public awareness of the relationship between air quality and health, which in turn led to several changes in practices and regulations, including the Clean Air Act of 1956. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this foggy weather episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I am a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a man with a very dark and disturbed sense of humour who only the other day noticed a policeman crying while he was writing me a ticket, and when I asked him why, he told me it is because it is a moving violation. But to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every week, usually on a Friday night, though occasionally on a Saturday, allowing for bank holidays and busy weeks, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These subjects include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, the darker side of some past celebrities, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of the episode's subject matter that I can reply to, a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. Or, if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. And if you do get a few minutes, perhaps you might like to check out my other social media groups and pages, including Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, which are filled daily with all things unexplained and crime. I will put the links to some of my socials in the description. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the Peasouper story regarding the Great Smog of London. And this week's necessary disclaimer: this story is a tale that sadly involves people dying through misadventure, so may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, I found out the other day that Bigfoot is sometimes confused with Sasquatch, yet he never complains. Did you see what I did there? Anyway, enough of this foolishness, and let us get back to the story. I thought I would do something a little different in this episode when it comes to describing the general area of where the event, or disaster even, happened. And so instead of talking about London in general and as the Great Smog happened in 1952, I thought it would be more fitting to describe London from the point of view of the 1950s. So here goes. Well, according to various reports, 1950s London was marked by a significant social, cultural and economic change, which included the aftermath of World War II, the rise of new technologies, along with other notable events like the aforementioned Great Smog and the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. After the devastation of World War II, London was undergoing extensive reconstruction, and with many buildings still in ruins, the city was still in the process of rebuilding and redeveloping its infrastructure. The 1950s saw the end of rationing and a gradual improvement in living standards, along with the introduction of household technologies such as televisions and washing machines, which transformed the daily lives for many Londoners, along with the welfare state being in full bloom and providing better housing options, including council homes, which offered a better alternative to the slums that were available to the residents during the 1930s and 1940s. This decade was also notable for cultural events and shifts, which included the Festival of Britain in 1951, which celebrated the nation's recovery and showcased British achievements in art and sciences, along with it being a pivotal moment that highlighted optimism for its future. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953 was another landmark event, marking a new era for both the monarchy and the country, with street parties and celebrations across London's thoroughfares and neighbourhoods. The 1950s also saw the emergence of youth subcultures, or otherwise thought of as the invention of the teenager, such as the Teddy Boys, with this period marking the beginning of a more vibrant youth culture in London, which would continue to evolve in the following decades. Overall, the 1950s were a transformative decade for London, which was characterised by the recovery from war, social change and cultural developments that laid the groundwork for the vibrant city it is today, and along with the combination of historical events, social progress and cultural shifts, it makes this period of the 1950s a significant chapter in London's history. It all started on the 4th of December in 1952, when a high-pressure air system, which was otherwise known as a anticyclone, settled over a calm, breezeless London, which in turn caused a temperature inversion with relatively cool, stagnant air trapped under a layer of warm air. On a very quick interesting side note here, a high-pressure air system, or an anticyclone, is an area near the surface of a planet where the atmospheric pressure is greater than the pressure on the surrounding regions. The strongest high air pressure areas result from masses of cold air which spread out from the polar regions into cool neighbouring regions once they extend out over warmer bodies of water. On English language weather maps, high pressure centres are simply identified by the letter H. So, due to this high-pressure air system, or anticyclone, mixed with smoke from homes, industrial chimneys, particulates such as those from motor vehicle exhausts, along with other pollutants akin to sulphur dioxide, this resultant fog then formed a persistent smog, which then blanketed the capital of London the following day, with the presence of tarry particles of soot giving the smog its greenish-yellow colour, hence its nickname known as a Peasouper, and, along with the absence of any significant winds, this then prevented its dispersal and allowed an unprecedented accumulation of pollutants. Believe it or not, there was initially no panic, as London was infamous for its fogs. However, this one was denser and longer lasting than any previous Peasouper, and with visibility reduced to just a few metres. One of London's visitors stated at the time that it was, and I quote,
"like you were blind,"
rendering driving difficult, or even at times impossible. After this first short break, in part 2 we will look at more details regarding the Great Smog of London, including its effects on health and public transport.
Ghost Planet Network, broadcasting from the other side. Ready to tune in to terror? The Ghost Planet Network is your new home for original paranormal content, streaming straight from beyond the veil. We've got it all: spine-tingling stories, chilling documentaries, and real paranormal investigations from the world's most haunted hotspots. Perfect for believers, skeptics, and anyone who loves a good scare. Join the paranormal TV revolution. Get unlimited access for just £12 per year. Tune in now. Email us at neil.hapra@gmail.com to sign up. That is neil.haprc@gmail.com.
Public transport, other than the London Underground, was also halted, and the number of car accidents placed the ambulance services in the London area under a severe strain. In fact, the smog was so dense that it even seeped indoors, which resulted in the cancellation or abandonment of concerts and film screenings, as visibility decreased in large enclosed spaces, stages and screens, as they became harder to see from the seats, with outdoor sporting events also being called off, and smog masks were being worn by those who were able to purchase them from the chemists. In the inner London suburbs and away from the town centres, there was no disturbance by any moving traffic to thin out the dense smog that lingered in the back streets. So, as a result, visibility in the daytime could be down to at least 1 metre, so walking outdoors became a matter of shuffling to feel for potential obstacles such as curbs, which was made even worse at night, since each backstreet lamp was only fitted with an incandescent light bulb, so gave no penetrating light onto the pavement for pedestrians to see their feet or even a lamppost, as unfortunately fog-penetrating fluorescent lamps did not become widely available until later in the 1950s. On an interesting side note here, an incandescent light bulb, which is also known as an incandescent lamp or incandescent light globe, is an electric light that produces illumination by dual heating a filament, which is the process by which the passage of an electric current through a conductor produces heat until it glows. In the weeks that ensued, the Great Smog of London in 1952 statistics, which were compiled by the medical services, found that the fog had actually killed 4,000 people, with many of the victims either being very young or very elderly. That, or had a pre-existing respiratory or cardiovascular problem. And in the February of 1953, the Labour MP, Marcus Lipton, suggested in the House of Commons that the fog had actually caused 6,000 deaths, along with 25,000 more people claiming sickness benefits in London during that period, which was never finalised, blaming those deaths on an influenza epidemic. However, and over time with emerging evidence, it was later revealed that not only a fraction of those... It was later recovered that only a fraction of those deaths could have actually been from influenza. On another quick interesting side note here, influenza, which is commonly known to us as the flu, is an infectious disease caused by influenza viruses, with symptoms ranging from a mild to severe fever, runny nose, sore throat, muscle pain, headaches, coughing and fatigue, with diarrhea and vomiting, particularly in children. These symptoms begin 1 to 4, but typically 2 days after exposure to the virus and last for about 2 to 8 days. Influenza may progress to pneumonia from the virus or a subsequent bacterial infection, with other complications including acute respiratory distress syndrome, meningitis, encephalitis, and the worsening of any pre-existing health problems such as asthma and or any cardiovascular diseases. The officer in charge of atmospheric pollution at the government's Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, Mr. E.T. Wilkins, was effectively the UK's top pollution expert at the time, and so plotted a chart of elevated death rates for the period from the December of 1952 to the March of 1953, and found that there had been an additional 8,000 deaths beyond those initially counted, making it 12,000 fatalities in total, claiming that most of the deaths during that period were caused by respiratory tract infections from hypoxia and as a result of the mechanical obstruction of the air passages by catarrh or pus arising from lung infections caused by the smog, with the lung infections themselves being mainly bronchopneumonia or acute purulent bronchitis superimposed upon chronic bronchitis. And on another interesting side note, bronchitis is an inflammation of the bronchi, which is a passage or airway in the lower respiratory tract that conducts air into the lungs, that causes coughing and usually begins as an infection in the nose, ears, throat or sinuses, with this infection then making its way down to the bronchi. Symptoms of bronchitis include coughing up sputum, wheezing, shortness of breath and chest pain. Acute bronchitis usually has a cough that lasts around 3 weeks and is also known as a chest cold. However, chronic bronchitis is defined as a productive cough, or one that produces sputum that lasts for 3 months or more per year for at least 2 years. Research that was published in 2004 also suggested that the number of fatalities caused by the Great Smog of London in 1952 was about 12,000, which was also around 3 to 4 times greater than the official government figure of 4,000, but was the same as the figure that the officer in charge of atmospheric pollution at the time, Mr. E.T. Wilkins, had originally estimated. However, in the long term, sadly, individuals who were either fetuses or infants at the time of the smog ended up having either a lower intelligence or worse respiratory health than their peers. So, before I continue with the show's subject of the Great Smog of London, let us first ask ourselves, what exactly is smog? Well, according to various sources, smog is primarily caused by a combination of air pollutants, which include nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and particulate matter, which react in the presence of sunlight to form a ground-level ozone. And as far as I can tell, there are 2 types of smog. First, there is the photochemical smog, which is often referred to as the Los Angeles smog. With this type of smog that occurs in urban areas with high automobile usage and forms when sunlight reacts with nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds that are emitted from vehicles and industrial sources, resulting in ground-level ozone and other harmful pollutants, making this type of smog more prevalent during the warmer months when sunlight is in abundance. And secondly, there is the sulphurous smog, which is also known as the London smog, with this type of smog being characterised by high concentrations of sulphur oxides, primarily from burning fossil fuels like coal, and is much more common in the colder months when coal is used for heating, with the damp conditions aggravating its effect. And again, according to a variety of sources, there are 4 key causes of smog formations, which are:
Number 1, vehicle emissions.
These include things like cars, trucks and buses, which are a significant source of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds, which are precursors to smog, with heavy traffic, especially in the urban areas, contributing to higher smog levels.
Number 2, industrial activities,
which include things like factories and power plants that release various pollutants, including sulphur dioxide and particulate matter, which can contribute to both types of smog, meaning photochemical and sulphurous.
Number 3, weather conditions.
A temperature inversion, where warm air traps cooler air near the ground, can prevent pollutants from dispersing, leading to increased smog concentrations, and calm winds and high temperatures can also enhance smog formation by allowing pollutants to accumulate.
And finally, number 4, natural sources.
Wildfires and agricultural practices such as stubble burning can release significant amounts of smoke and particulates into the atmosphere, contributing to smog, especially in rural areas. Smog is a complex mixture of pollutants formed through various human activities and natural processes, significantly impacting air quality and public health, and understanding its causes is crucial for developing effective strategies to reduce its occurrence and mitigate its effects. And as we already know from the details I've already mentioned, smog can cause a variety of health issues, including respiratory problems, eye irritation and a reduced functioning of the lungs, with it also negatively affecting the environment by damaging crops and forests and contributing to an ever-changing climate. The phenomenon of London fog predates the crisis of the early 1950s with these Peasoupers, which again were so called due to their dense yellow appearance, becoming a hallmark of London by the 19th century. However, this polluted fog was actually an issue in London as early as the 13th century due to the burning of coal, with the situation only worsening as the city continued to expand. Complaints about smoke and pollution increased in the 1600s when ultimately ineffective legislation was passed under the rule of King James I to restrict coal burning. However, due to rapidly increasing industrialisation that began in the late 1700s, this only made conditions even worse. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at more details of how the London Peasouper affected the city's population and how it triggered the Clean Air Acts of 1956 and 1968.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07 852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk. Or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
A period of unusually cold weather preceding and during the Great Smog led to many Londoners to burn much more coal than usual to keep themselves warm, and while better quality hard coals such as anthracite tended to be exported to pay off the World War II debts, locals were inclined to use a post-war domestic coal which tended to be a relatively low-grade sulphurous variety called nutty slack that in turn increased the amount of sulphur dioxide in the smoke. On an interesting side note, nutty slack, or coal dust, is a fine powdered form of coal which is created by crushing, grinding, or the pulverization of coal rock, and because of the brittle nature of this type of coal, dust can be created by mining, transporting, or even through mechanically handling it. Due to the distribution of the particle size of coal dust, it is frequently measured in mesh or particle size measurements, and the British slang term for this cheap fuel consisting of coal dust or very small lumps of coal is called nutty slack. But as well as the nutty slack home fires smogging up London streets, there were also numerous coal-fired electrical power stations in the Greater London area, which included Fulham, Battersea, Bankside, Greenwich, West Ham and Kingston upon Thames, all of which added to the pollution, and according to the UK's Met Office during the smoggy period, the following pollutants were emitted every day: 1,000 tonnes of smoke particles, 150 tonnes of hydraulic acid and 14 tonnes of fluorine compounds, and 370 tonnes of sulphur dioxide, which may have been converted to 800 tonnes of sulphuric acid. Research has also suggested that the additional prevention systems that were fitted at Battersea did in fact worsen the air quality at that time due to the flue gas washing, reducing the temperature of the flue gases, and so as a consequence, instead of rising, they slumped to ground level, causing more of a local annoyance. Another very quick interesting side note here: the flue gas is the gas exiting into the atmosphere via a flue, which is a pipe or channel for conveying exhaust gases such as from a fireplace, oven, furnace, boiler or steam generator. These days, Battersea employs various pollution prevention systems to manage and mitigate air and environmental pollution, which include air quality monitoring, which is the continuous measurements of pollutants like mould spores, formaldehyde and allergens to maintain a healthy environment; chemical bunds, which is a containment system for hazardous spills preventing pollution; school filter programs such as high efficiency particulate air filters installed in schools to improve air quality and reduce pollution; and sustainability initiatives, which is an effort to protect the unique heritage of Battersea Power Station and minimise the environmental impact through resource management and energy efficient practices, which makes these systems critical for safeguarding health, maintaining productivity and ensuring compliance with environmental regulations at Battersea. Additional causes for the Great Smog of London of 1952 was the pollution and smoke from vehicle exhausts, particularly from the steam locomotives and diesel-fueled buses, which had replaced the recently abandoned electrical tram system, along with other industrial and commercial sources which also contributed to the air pollution. Although the event of 1952 is now widely regarded as the London smog, the pea soup pollution did in fact extend far beyond the capital, and according to the aforementioned E.T. Wilkins, who, if you remember, was from the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, his measurements along with his research would make a clear connection between smoke, sulphur dioxide and the rising deaths, with the fog, the white mist or the grimy smog covering, and I quote, "many parts of the British Isles." He continues, and again I quote, "In London and the Thames Valley, fog or smog covered upwards of 100,000 square miles." However, it was in London that the smog's effects were the greatest. Environmental legislation since 1952, such as the City of London Act 1954 and the Clean Air Acts of 1956 and 1968, did indeed lead to a reduction in air pollution, and by using financial incentives which were offered to householders, they replaced open coal fires with alternatives such as gas fires or to burn coke instead, and this did help to produce minimal smoke. And although central heating by using gas, electricity, oil or permitted solid fuel was a clever invention, it was kind of a rare thing in most dwellings at that time and didn't find favour until the late 1960s onwards. However, despite these improvements, insufficient progress had been made to prevent one further smog event 10 years later, in the early December of 1962, which is thought to have led to the deaths of up to another 700 people. But I will go into more details of that disaster in another podcast sometime next year.
Thank you for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 179, we are going to be looking at The Day the Clown Cried. The Day the Clown Cried is an unfinished and unreleased 1972 Swedish-French drama film directed by and starring Jerry Lewis, about a circus clown imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp. The film has gained notoriety and mystique over the decades for its controversial premise, a well-known example of an unfinished film, and Jerry Lewis himself repeating and insisting that The Day the Clown Cried would never be released.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The pronunciations of all the names and places was mine. I think there was one I really did get wrong, wasn't I? But never mind. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff of the Haunting Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley, and of course a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you do know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I will do a deep search and see what I can do. I will also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast, if they're happy for me to do so, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. No AI was used or harmed in the making of this or any other episode of Mark's Unexplained World. This show and all its contents are covered by the basic copyright of Mark the Medium.